I just got it, okay? You got
Hi,
me?
my name is Patrick McDonough. Today is September 23rd, 2022. I have the absolute honor and privilege of interviewing Mr. Paul Vallas. I did this before a couple of weeks ago, and guess what? I got so nervous I forgot to press record, or the time went off too much. And I'm really so impressed with Paul Vallas. It was a lack of professionalism on my part. So I'm very grateful to you for coming back, trying this again. But I think we all know how important this interview is for everybody. Chicago Cloud's been interviewing people on TV shows and things like that for well over 20 years, 25 years already. We've also been on Can TV. We make fun cartoons on our website. We try to have fun with politicians. We do all sorts of crazy and fun things, and we also make time to get very serious. Today, we're going to get real serious with Paul Vallas because the city of Chicago definitely needs somebody who's competent at this time. There's too much going on. It's out of control. It's all about one person. And we want an administration where everybody feels positive about themselves and the direction of the city. It's all about the city, not about one person or whatever choices that we make. And we're not going to talk about that because it's not important. I have some questions for you, Mr. Vallas, and my number one question is because I'm a city of Chicago employee. I've worked for the Department of Water Management well in excess of 20 years. I'm very close to many city workers. All of us talk to each other every day. The number one question is, what's your outlook for the pensions for Chicago city workers?
Well, I think there's a pathway out of our present pension crisis, and it requires that we do two things. Let me preface my remarks by saying there is not going to be a constitutional amendment approved by the legislature that will put the issue of changing the pension systems on the ballot. So, so they can debate and discuss those things all they want. The bottom line is it's not going to happen. And what our leaders have got to do is address the fact that they have not adequately funded the system and that they have not been realizing the returns on their pension investments. So I would address the pension crisis in two ways. The first thing I would do is I would work to make up for the revenue shortfall. And the second thing is I would improve the investment returns. Now, let me tell you how I do that. On the revenue shortfall, I would use tax increment financing revenues, the revenues that will be freed up when the current TIFs expire, to provide the financing necessary to make up for the revenue shortfalls that were the result of the pension holiday that was initiated and that was passed by the legislature in 2008. That pension holiday decimated the pension systems, not only at the local level, but at the state level. If you do that, if you issue bonds, amortize the interest and finance those bonds with revenues from expiring tax increment financing districts, you will be able to make up for most of that shortfall without having to raise property taxes. So that's the first thing I would do. The second thing that I would do is I would consolidate all the pension investment practices under a single entity. In other words, put together an entity that makes the investment decisions and that takes politics out of pension investments. We've had decades of scandals, not only deliberate scandals where politically connected investment entities, in effect, invested pension funds with little return, and sometimes invested pension funds with 100% losses. And then, of course, we've had this tendency on the part of all the pension funds collectively not to realize the type of returns that we are seeing other systems in other states realize. So if you consolidated the pension investment practices under a single non-political professional board with some of the best and most creative and innovative investors around who would make those investments based on what's in the best interest of the system and its and the employees that that system is supposed to provide retirement for, and you were able to take politics out of the pension investments, I think that in combination of making up for the money that was not put in during the pension holiday, those two things in combination would provide the system with both the income and the revenues that it would need to, in fact, bridge the gap, that the funding gap that exists now. And it would put all the systems, not only the Chicago Teachers Retirement System, but the city pension funds on a much healthier footing, and it would get us out of this crisis.
Okay, thank you very much. My next question is, Jay Stone himself, who's not an attorney, wrote a fabulous federal lawsuit, and I financed it all. And we did everything we could to remove Alderman Ed Burke from his steadfast control of the Committee on Finance. It was a patronage place for his local neighbors. Three city of Chicago attorneys that work for the law department told us in federal court out in the hallway, you'll never take this away from Alderman Burke. And fortunately, WTTW Channel 11, which was Paris Schutz, ran the story on what we were doing. And we were just a little bunch of little squirts and fighters. And because of the popularity and Fran Spielman at the Chicago Sun-Times, it created so much trouble, they ended up taking this away from him. What's your opinion of Alderman Burke having control of the workers' comp system?
Well, I always felt it was almost like the politics of that I refer to of the pension investment practices, and when you have a system like that, it's fraught for it's just fraught for to be corrupted. And I always felt that the workman's comp system should be a system that's managed administratively and independent of the politics. And the way to do that is really to bring people into professionally manage the city's workman's comp programs. Because on so many levels, the inability and sometimes unwillingness to address these workman's comp issues early on, which only leads to much greater cost to the city over the long term, to basically making sure that there is an equitable and fair resolution to workman's comp claims. I just think that I've always felt that the workman's comp system here needs to be professional. It needs to be professional. It needs to be run competently, and it needs to be run devoid of politics. And I think if you do this, you're not only going to be able to address the workman's comp needs of city workers in a more timely and a fairer manner, but I think over the long term, it'll be a much more efficient system, and the city will save money over the long term. It's like 1 ounce of prevention. You invest early on, you do the right things up front. I mean, ultimately, when you fail to do those things, not only do individuals suffer, but ultimately the city pays a heavy price. So yes, they've taken it away from the finance committee, but have they really reformed it? I mean, are people getting their workman's compensation claims satisfied in a timely manner, or are the claims themselves being resolved to their satisfaction? And the answer to all those questions are no. So yes, it's been taken out of the finance committee, but where's it resting? Is it a better system now than it was? When I talk to city workers, they have the same complaints that they had when it was in Burke's committee. So I think you really need to professionalize it, just as you need to professionalize the investment practices on how we invest our pension funds, so that our retirees can be guaranteed that the money they put into the system, they're going to get back. You need to professionalize the management of the workman's comp system. And that means you've got to take it out, professionalize the administration of the system, and insulate it from politics. So that's always been my approach. That's always been my position on that.
Well, when it comes to the backgrounds of the people who work for the Committee on Finance, you could certainly tell that Alderman Burke ran it, because out of the 67 employees, only 8 were African American, only 1 was Asian, 40 were Caucasian, 15 Hispanic, and there was a couple of other no responses. So we don't know what the people are. What I'm trying to say on this is that it certainly seems as though some people got better benefit, and if these committees and the employees from Chicago should reflect what the actual population is, and the race and the ethnic backgrounds and things along those lines, it should reflect it much better than it does. Do you have an opinion on that?
Well, I think if you take it out of the, by taking it out of the Finance Committee and literally creating a independent, standing, autonomous workman's compensation office that's overseen by workman's compensation experts. If you do that, then organically, I think that office is going to be more reflective of the community at large, because you're not going to be making political decisions when it comes to hiring. It'll be subject to the other hiring requirements and protocols that govern the hiring of city employees and other agencies. But I also think the equally, if not more important result will be you'll really professionalize the management of workman's comp. And that's what you need. That's absolutely what you need. So I think this is an easy solution. This is an easy fix. This is one of those no-brainers. And this is something that I'll easily be able to fix when I become mayor.
Well, we have some people, now isn't the time to do it, but we have some people that want to come forward to you. Of course, you can't correct everything that's been done wrong in the past with the city, but they really want to come forward and tell you their stories. And so many stories are so sad on the way city workers have been treated. I mean, it's horrendous. And a lot of city workers, what people don't know is we've gone to the federal government and to the FBI, and we've had a long conversation with them on what Alderman Burke was doing. He's got enough problems right now, but he's got more coming in the future.
I've always felt that what you have to do is, there are so many high quality models. I mean, there are some and I'm going to harken it back to pensions, because these are things that impact our employees. Pensions, workman's compensation, healthcare, et cetera. I've always felt that there are so many states doing extraordinary things. They have great models, great, very efficient, highly effective, responsive workman's comp models that address workman's comp issues in real time. And for someone who has suffered a devastating injury, real time is sometimes a lifetime. That real time, there's an immediacy to dealing with these issues. Sometimes because it can lead to so many complications, and just the social emotional trauma of having a serious injury and not having that injury addressed through the workman's compensation process can sometimes be devastating. But it's the same thing on the pension side. I mean, there are so many states whose returns over the last 30 years have, by comparison, our returns have been embarrassing. I mean, what would have happened had we been investing like some of those model states? So these problems are solvable. They're man-made, and they can be corrected by someone who wants to come in and insulate those programs from politics, so that whether you're investing in your pension systems or setting up a system to address city workers who have been injured on the job, you're doing it in a professional way, and you're selecting the best models, and you're insulating it from politics, which always has a corrupting effect.
Yes, and especially in this administration. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the way the Chicago Inspector General is run and has been run for a long time. A lot of times people really have no idea what the Chicago Inspector General does. The Chicago Inspector General, you'll see some articles and some pretty little interviews with the Chicago Sun-Times with my dear friend Franz Spielman, having a nice sit-down conversation with former Inspector General Joe Ferguson, and now this new lady who's running the place. And as a Chicago city worker, a lot of people have come to me, and I've personally seen how bad the Inspector General is. We were always thinking that somebody should oversee all the complaints that come into the Chicago Inspector General. The biggest problem is they only take a minute amount of the complaints, maybe just a few percentage points. And miraculously enough, when somebody says Pat McDonough, the old whistleblower, the hired truck scandal, blew his nose the wrong way, well, the whole entire Inspector General is at its feet and ready to get some work done. I really believe that there has to be proper oversight. Now, at the last interview that we had, you stated that it would be a good idea to have like a retired federal judge or somebody who's completely and totally independent of the entire process to look at the actual complaints and not have someone from the mayor's office telling the IG, hey, we got to look at this guy.
Well, I think, the fundamental problem with the Inspector General's office is that, first of all, you have too many Inspector Generals because everybody seems to have an Inspector General. And as the Park District demonstrated, some of them are highly political. And the second problem is so many of the things that could have been resolved if you had the right workman's compensation system with independent oversight. If you had a city council budget office that had the resources and had the independence and autonomy to evaluate and assess city spending and city programs. If you had a comptroller, like an elected comptroller who could provide a financial counterbalance to the mayor's office, so that you wouldn't have initiatives like the parking meter, the selling of the parking meters, or the Skyway, or for that matter, the parking garages. Those initiatives going forward without any sort of scrutiny. If you had those other entities in place, then you wouldn't have to place this enormous burden on the Inspector General's office. You know what I mean? So, so I think that there's those are issues that need to be addressed. Having a strong independent budget office to serve as a counterbalance to the mayor, to provide full transparency over program and spending, having a truly independent, autonomous, and professionally run workman's compensation system, the workman's compensation program that, as I pointed out in my earlier response, that would really professionalize the process and expedite and resolve issues, and also do investigations. And then the Inspector General could be more focused and could be more specialized in the type of things that the Inspector General was investigating. Now, that said and done, I would do two things with the Inspector General's office. I would consolidate the Inspector General's office, all the Inspector General's offices, so that you would have a single office. Because if you have that single office, then it's an economy of scale, so to speak. And the second thing is I would put that Inspector General under a board, under a professional board that would be chaired by a retired judge. So it would have true autonomy, and it would also have true transparency, because as you know, about 2 years ago, Lightfoot didn't like the reports that were coming out of the Inspector General's office. So she decided to get her allies to pass an ordinance to muzzle the Inspector General. So now, in effect, the Inspector General's reports can, in effect, be withheld from the public through the Corporation Council, because ultimately the Corporation Council has to sign off. So why do you have an Inspector General if the mayor can, in fact, pick and choose what reports they want to make public and what reports they don't? So I think you need to consolidate the Inspector General's office into a single office and place that office under the direction and under the guidance and to ensure that there's effective accountability of an independent entity that's really whose oversight board members are staffed by judges and people who have experience in these type of investigations. And I think if you do that, it'll address a lot of the issues that you've raised concerns about.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think it would save a lot of money because
Yes.
in almost every case that people fight the Inspector General's investigations, people don't even know. They finally go into court and then they just blow the whole case. And then, there's like a hearing officer and the whole thing. And they sit down and they listen to these investigations. And the Inspector General, in my case, they didn't want to release what looked like a cartoon book in the way that they follow city employees and where they live and where they don't live. It really looked like a cartoon book. And my attorney at the time says, "You got to be kidding me. This isn't a professional Inspector General." So there's so many issues and so many things that really have to be addressed, but it seems like anybody who wants to say anything, the only time we get to bring these issues forward is like in a case where we have a professional candidate who actually wants to hear what's going on and what's wrong. And once again, we're going to have some extremely devastating information that we want to give your campaign, but we can't right now. This is the beginning of your campaign. We don't want to be giving names and then have something that your staff told me straight out. No, we're going to check everything. Brian's outrageously professional. He says, no, we're going to go investigate everything. We're going to do FOIAs. We're going to look into this and that. That's the way to do it. And it's nice to hear. Here's my last question. The City of Chicago Law Department is the main political arm of the mayor's office, and it has been during this administration's. Millions are wasted on private law firms because city lawyers, they quit, they get fired. Also, the city hires questionable grade attorneys. I don't know if it's because they're not paid enough or they're going to lesser schools or they don't stick with the city long enough to become professional attorneys. And one of the best skills of being a professional attorney is knowing what a case is worth and how to resolve cases. Cases should not go on for 10 or 20 years. There shouldn't be millions and millions and millions of dollars spent on private law firms. And then these people are making contributions to the existing mayor's office in Chicago. The whole thing stinks. Could I please have your opinion on how this law department could be upgraded? Many decades ago, like old man Mayor Daley, he had a fearsome set of some of the best lawyers ever, and they resolved issues and they were on time. The city attorneys are always asking for continuances. They get chewed out by federal judges for not being prepared, switching lawyer to lawyer to lawyer to lawyer. It's a mess. Do you have any ideas on that?
Well, first of all, let me back up what you said with a few statistics. During the last election, I pointed out that during the previous decade, I think it was the 2010 to 2019. There had been almost $1 billion in settlements, and about $87 million of that had gone to law firms, not law firms that sued the city, but law firms that settled cases on behalf of the city.
Mm-hmm.
Those law firms are politically connected law firms. A lot of them make political contributions. So at the end of the day, you almost have like suing the city is like a cottage industry. And you're absolutely right. The law department does not have the capacity to litigate on behalf of the city. con- consequently, they're constantly paying out these massive settlements. And what do they care? They go out and they borrow, and that borrowing is paid for by property taxes. So it doesn't immediately impact the budget, but down the road, you ultimately have to pay. Certainly, property taxpayers pay, and then they're paying out these huge settlements, massive settlements, and for the law firms, they'd rather settle so that they can take another case that they can settle, and then another that they can settle, and not waste a lot of their time, because there's a constant assembly line of cases coming before them. So I think what you have to do with the law department is you really need to create a professional litigation division, and that needs to be part of an effort to, because if you have a professional litigation division working hand in hand with a risk management division side by side, that means, first of all, anytime there's a lawsuit, you're assessing and evaluating the elements of the lawsuit so that you can learn from that lawsuit, so you can make adjustments, whether it's in work rules or public safety or whatever. So you never have to litigate on that again. You never get sued on that, because every lawsuit has to be a learning experience. And right now it's not. They go on. A lot of these departments, agencies, they continue to engage in the same practices and make the same mistakes that could get them sued time and time again. So if you have, first of all, a litigation division of professional litigators that you have to pay, and litigators that have extensive experience, then people know when they sue the city, they could very well get tied up in court. They could very well, if it's a frivolous lawsuit, be subject to a countersuit. But the bottom line is, you need to have an aggressive litigation division with experienced attorneys that are going to defend the public dollar to the best of their ability. As simple as that. And then you need that risk management division that is going to look at these lawsuits and look at why these lawsuits are being brought, so that the individual departments, whether it's police or fire, or whether it's the water department, they're making whatever adjustments they need to make, so they're not going to be sued in the future. Isn't it ironic that we are so hard on our city employees when it comes to workman's comp or their benefits, or whether or not they're eligible for health care or whatever, and we literally strangle them. We literally prolong their agony, because sometimes these workman's compensation cases, the delay, it can be punishing on families, but yet we're so quick to settle when we get these public lawsuits. Many times these lawsuits border on frivolous lawsuits, and because they're just settling these cases one after another, and at the end of the day, it's not the law department's money. It's not their money that's coming out of their pocket. It's money being taken out of the pocket of taxpayers.
Well, I'll give you one example, but no name, of course. One gentleman who worked for the water department, he could not breathe at all. He could not breathe. And just to look at him and talk to him like I did, you'd feel like you were just underwater. You kept thinking, oh, can I breathe? And you could see the agony he went through. And I'm not quite sure what caused it, because of course we don't want to say. But the thing is that he, on a 4th of July, was ordered by the city to go back to work, a guy who could not breathe. And he just walked in the garage and he shot himself, and it was all over. And there's all these stories that go on and on and on. Now, getting back to another thing that you just talked about, a lot of people continue to work at the city who are a liability if there ever was one. And in fact, in one of the most popular characters who's out right now, who I won't say a name, costing the city millions of dollars, was known by the inspector general of his activities in emails and documented. And the city just loses these cases because they say, Well, you knew about him 15 years ago. Why didn't you do anything? Oh, well, he was related to this and that, is the truth of the matter. And that's what the real story is. And because of the politics that just continues on at the city really puts itself into such a horrible condition, and the taxpayers have to pay again and again for the same characters. I think it's pretty close to time that we should wrap up our video, because people in a lot of cases only have a limited amount of attention span, including maybe
Well,
me.
Well, I want to really quick, because you really spoke to the issue of people being promoted to positions of responsibility, not based on their skills, their time and grade, as you like to say in the military, their experience, their additional training, but sometimes it's just friends and family. We see that in the police department. I mean, look, I've been a big critic of the current leadership in the police department. I think Brown and the Superintendent Brown, the first deputy, are incompetent. And what's happening is the exempt ranks seem to be filled by friends and family, individuals who have been promoted not based on their time and grade, not based on their experience, not based on their accomplishments, not based on their additional schooling and additional training. And I think one of the things that we've got to do is we've got to professionalize our management, not the rank and file, because they are professionalized, but the management, the individuals who move into positions of responsibility, these executive positions, these administrative positions in the area of fire and police, these exempt ranks, they have to be the best and the brightest. They have to be the people who have the experience, who have gone through the additional schooling, who have records of accomplishment, who have been in the field. Sometimes we promote people in the police department, individuals to senior positions, to leadership positions, and they spend very little time on the local police beat. So at the end of the day, we need to do it for two reasons. The first reason we need to do it is to avoid many of the problems that you've just identified, the mistakes that the city constantly seems to pay for, not only in terms of reduce less efficient services, but just ultimately in cost, because when you make mistakes and there's liability involved, ultimately the city pays. But we also have to do it because, working for the city it's a privilege, and it should be viewed as a privilege, and people should feel that they're a part of a professional organization that recognizes those who work really hard and put the time in and go through the additional schooling and training and have demonstrated their capacity to lead. I mean, that's the way it should be. We have to do it for the sake of our workers, not only to make sure that our workers are being led, that city workers are being led by the best of them, by individuals who have earned the right to lead, but also that they're being led by individuals who are going to take care of them, the individuals who are going to motivate them. And that's critically important. And I think if there's been a central theme of your line of questioning, it's been about that. God knows we have the talent. In every single school district that I took responsibility for, whether it's Chicago or when I went to Philadelphia to do that turnaround or even rebuild schools in New Orleans, I always promoted from within because the talent was always there. But I promoted people from within to positions of leadership who, when I promoted them, the rank and file's response was, yeah, that's someone I can follow. Yeah, that's someone who earned that promotion. Yeah, that's someone, that promotion gives me confidence in the person who's leading the school district, that person is being driven by a need to surround himself with the type of talent that's going to move that school system forward. So I think you hit on a theme, and that's always been my golden rule, so to speak. When you promote people into positions of responsibility that deserve it, only good things happen, and
hold them accountable.
Absolutely. Then you get real accountability and real respect.
Okay. Well, this is part one of a video series that I'm really hoping. I'm telling you, there's some people who really want to talk to you and your campaign. You have a website. What's that one?
Paul Vallas 2023.
Paul Vallas 2023. That's on Facebook. I understand, I just heard a little chirp that you're creating an office as we speak. Hopefully you'll have phone numbers and easy
We
ways.
will.
Yeah, and I look forward to seeing that soon too. But
And also people can follow me on my public Facebook. I post all the time, also on LinkedIn, just by looking up Paul Vallas. So I do regular postings on a whole variety of issues, and they can also connect with me personally over Messenger. So I look forward to hearing from people.
okay, well, God bless you, and thank you very much for talking to the little people. And there's a whole ton of us, and we're looking forward to your leadership to bring Chicago into the future, and to just make things about Chicago with leadership we can really be proud of. And I really have to say that your staff conducts itself with such impeccable professionalism. I think Brian's a real asset to you. And that's our conclusion. I thank you very gratefully, and I'm stopping this video. Thank you so much.